Welcome to your 30s. You're going to love it. Welcome, everybody, to Life at 30. Joining me today, I have Sid, who you may recognize from his Here's Something I Didn't Know Until I Was in My 30s videos. Hi, Sid. Thank you so much
Hi,
for joining me. How are you?
good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Good,
I really
good.
appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I actually appreciate you jumping on here. So you make videos, of
Yes.
course, of things that you didn't know until you were in your 30s. And I thought, what a great collaboration. I do this like podcast, and essentially what I'm trying to get people to see is a little bit on the other side, the positive side of what happens in your
Yes.
life in your 30s, right?
Yes. Being in your 30s, it's a very daunting thing, but like, I don't know. Everyone it's not as bad as everyone thinks.
It's really not. I always say how awesome my life is, honestly, ever since I turned 30. So
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to
Exactly.
bring that same positive energy to everyone that enters their 30s.
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you, so how 30 are you?
I am 33. I'll be 34 in November. So I'm like, when I say things I wish I knew before I was in my 30s, it's like I've been in this for a minute and it's pretty crazy that I didn't know these things. So yeah,
Yeah.
33.
Well, I'll be 37 in September. Yeah. And watching your videos, it's even crazier that in my almost 37, I didn't know a lot of things that you put out there, those tips and tricks. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's just things, it's things that like, especially as adults, it just you're so overcome with a sense of like you need to know these things. And then these huge things come up like how do mortgages work, how to pay
yes.
taxes, how to,
Yes.
survive and budget for things or whatever. And then it's
Absolutely.
like, but how does this spoon work?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think that's kind of just like the world of like, oh, like I had to figure out how to have my child survive, but I actually didn't know that the dishwasher worked this way, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, like the little things that everybody takes for granted,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So in this 3 years, how are your 30s treating you? I understand you're expecting a baby.
Yeah.
Your first Is this
Yeah.
your first one?
My first little girl's about to show up, so it's pretty exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, she'll be here soon. I don't know when. She'll make her debut, maybe in a week, maybe in 4 hours. I don't even know. But
Maybe in the middle of this
maybe in
interview.
the
Who
middle of this
knows?
podcast,
Yeah.
I'll get a text and say, "Hey, please end your podcast because we have to go to the hospital."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. I mean, I think my 30s have been, I think, a lot better than my 20s in a lot of ways, just like stability wise, therapy wise, like, all of those things that you sort of don't want to do in your 20s because you have such an insane sense of FOMO.
Yeah.
Um, that yeah, my 3 years of my 30s have been pretty good. I got married at 20. I think I got married at 30.
At 30. Okay.
Yeah, it was either like married at 30 or married at like 31 or something. I was definitely engaged.
At
Yeah.
30. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it was like, I did the things at 30. Um, but I was really kind of lucky to meet my wife at like 26 or 27.
Okay.
So like we had like a good few years of like debauchery in our 20s. And
Yeah.
then yeah, so that was really so like then the 30s came around, I was like house and now kid on the way. Um, yeah, but like it's been great this past year, especially. This has been really exciting to be in my 30s and just like say that on the internet, and then people go, "Oh, that's crazy that you're in your 30s." I tend to get those reactions from younger people, but also people that like don't believe me that I'm in my 30s,
Yeah.
because it's like because I think people in your 30s, especially when you were teenagers, it's like, hey, you have a house or you're supposed to have a house, you're supposed to do all these things. But like we kind of got stuck in this middle ground post '08 where like nobody knew what they were supposed to do with their lives.
Yeah.
And And then like now that I'm in my 30s and I do all these very simple things, and they're all like, how are you in your 30s? How did you survive? It's like it's the broad spectrum of just like all types of people that are just like, you shouldn't have made it, and I don't know how you did.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really interesting when like a 19-year-old or like a 14-year-old or something will be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. And I'm just like, no, you won't. It's fine. You're not
Yeah.
going to remember this, like that kind of thing.
And I have to say, now that we have this type of platform, social media,
Yeah.
I think younger people forget that we didn't have the exposure that they have now when we were
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah.
So tips and tricks like you share, we were not seeing that in like the 90s, you know?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I think that that's probably the surprise.
Yeah.
Like, how did you not already know this? And they forget, well, I wasn't exposed to what you're
Right.
exposed to, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's, no one's ever brought that up before, but it's really interesting to think of like, we were just asking people if they knew this thing, right?
Yeah.
Like we grew up and it was like, hey, do you know where this, like how do I get to the movie theater? And
Right.
people were like, I think it's down there, or like, someone once said like, we never have that moment anymore where like we don't know something. It's like, dang, what was that guy from? Like he was in a movie. Like I look on IMDb every single night. Every single night. I'm just like, where was that guy from? Oh, that's what she was in, like that kind of thing.
Right.
So for us, it was like one of the reasons why I started these videos was because it was just my sister and I texting each other like, yo, did you know this? Right. And when I was growing up, yeah, like we would ask our parents or we would ask whoever, and they wouldn't even know. It would just be like, I guess that's just how it works.
Right.
Um, so now we can like have this like mass ingestion of content and like finding out these little things, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is. And I honestly,
Yeah.
I truly enjoy your videos.
Thank
Like,
you. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, what is one thing about life that you wish you knew before you were in your 30s?
Yeah. About life in general.
Yeah.
Oh man. I think that one thing about life that I wish I knew before I was in my 30s is just sort of like, you know, FOMO isn't real, and you can actually stay home. You
Yeah.
can actually stay home.
Yeah.
Like you might miss out on the story or something that your friends say, but like after a while it's just the same thing. Like I think the reason why people in their 30s don't like going to bars anymore is because the same thing just happens over and over and over again. And
Right.
it's just like, what's really going to be the difference
Right.
if we go to the bar, right? Like I've done it.
Yeah.
Actually, one thing is like you can just ask for more money from your employer, or you can just ask them how much they pay because they
Hmm.
have to tell you. And like there's this whole world of like, oh, never talk about it, never talk about it. But like you can, like, and it's also a lot harder to get fired than you'd think. That's a big thing. But yeah, just like little things like that, that like sort of like scare you into being in your 20s and like working and being terrified of your life. But it's usually okay.
Yeah. And I mean, me that I'll be 37 soon, um, I don't have FOMO. I rather just stay home. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
probably more enjoyable, honestly. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
especially
we get to that point. I mean, the other night on Friday night, I don't even know what we were doing. We were just at home and I was like, Friday night, baby, like here we are. Like, like let's pregame and then go to bed at 10. Like, let's
yes,
do it.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm on the same boat. I'm like
Yeah, for
9:30,
sure.
guys. Okay, let's
It's
wrap
so
it up.
good.
Gotta
Oh my
go.
gosh. I never thought I would like bedtime as much as I do now. Like
Yeah.
I get it. Like I get it.
So tell me, how do you actually come up with all of these tips and tricks? Like, where do you get all this stuff from?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy now. I started posting all of these things that my older sister and I like just would just find out, and I would text her and she would text me, and it'd be like that kind of thing, right? So we would just sort of like constantly blow each other's minds. We would just be like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And then finally I was just like, I'm just going to tell people on the internet that I just found this thing out. and let's see how it goes,
Right.
and like how to use a can opener, or like how to put a trash bag in a trash can, or how to wear an airplane pillow more comfortably. And then after a while, people just started sending me stuff. People just send me like ideas and comments and DMs, and they're all just like, "Oh my gosh, I just found this out. I just found this out. I just like this is crazy. Like, did you know this? Did you know this?" And like 9 times out of 10, I'm just sitting there like, "How did I not know this?"
Yeah.
Like, it's nuts. And I think because they're such simple tasks, we sort of just like do them robotically. And then once we find out an easier way, it's like, wait, is that how that works? Oh, like like I was struggling this whole time with this. I
Yep.
thought it was annoying for everyone, but the manufacturer figured it out,
Yep.
like that kind of thing. So it just like constantly is being fed to me now.
You made a video not too long ago about peeling an egg. And I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like at some point in my life, many, many years ago,
Yeah.
I knew this,
Yeah.
but here I am in my present time, and I'm over here, like, like trying to break them, do all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff. And then I actually like take chunks of the
Yeah, me
egg,
too. Me too. Yeah.
and so when I saw that, I was like, I knew that. But like you just
Yeah.
said, you just do it so repetitive that you don't like
Yeah.
stop to think there's a better way.
Yeah, and it's also like those two extra steps you just don't think about, because like you pick up the egg, hot egg, let it cool. Okay, fine, let's crack it.
Right.
Like that's what you do. You crack it on the table, and then you just like take whatever.
Yeah.
Then if you just like put it in a jar of water and you shake it, the water like gets in the membrane, and you can like easily peel off the skin. And like when you first do it, you're just like, oh my gosh, like that's insane. I eat hard boiled eggs every single morning,
Yeah.
and like to just like see that there's an easier way, just to take 2 extra minutes to just put a jar of water somewhere and just shit. Like, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
It's a game changer.
It ruined it. The key of my content is like, they're game changers that ruin your life, because
Yeah.
you have to like sit there, and you have to sit with them, and you have to go, why, how long did I waste doing this a more difficult way, just for
Yeah.
no reason?
How many years of my life have I wasted?
I, I mean, truly, it's like the
Yeah.
craziest thing.
Well, listen, I saw your story. I saw your journey on becoming a content creator.
Yes.
And I know that you actually used to make content back in the day,
Yes.
like 10 plus years, but
Yes.
you also talked about how like nothing actually like stuck. So
Right.
why do you feel that like now the content that you're creating is being more successful than before?
Yeah, I mean, I think um you know it took a long time to figure out what I wanted to say, and I think it took a lot of time to like figure out really, really like what I wanted to say to myself. I think that was a big part of it, right? Like, for the longest time, I was like emulating other people, and like being a vlogger, trying to do Vine stuff, trying to like post comedy vines, and be an influencer on Instagram or whatever, and post those like pics of like me posing and like in front of whatever. But it was always sort of, I always felt like, not bad, but just sort of like, I'm just trying to do this thing that other people are doing, right?
Right.
And then when I got, like, I guess last year, when I was finally just like, what would I want to say to myself in my 20s? Like, that's kind of like something that I really, really held on to. It was just sort of like, I would just tell myself these simple things that made my life a little bit hard all of the time. And so when I started doing that, and sort of just like speaking to myself, essentially, it was, I think, a lot more like vulnerable and truthful than anything I'd ever tried before. And also, I think this type of content was like a combination of all of those failures on one place, on one platform. And I think TikTok is such a unique place where it can be YouTube, it can be Vine, it can be Instagram, it can be Snapchat, Snapchat, it can be all of these things all on one place, but they all like melt together so wonderfully. And then you have a completely wide new audience that have never seen your videos before. Um, so I think that was a lot of like the creativity and sort of like finding my own voice that took a long time that I like quite frankly didn't have for forever. So I think that was a big part of it. Just like really like once you understand that like you're making it for you and trying to like help your younger self out, I think that was a big part of it.
And actually, with everything you just said resonates 100% with me.
Yeah.
I do this podcast honestly as a hobby.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, like broadcast it so much. I recently just got on TikTok. And so
Welcome.
yeah, thank you. So I just like you said, I actually do it for my younger self and then for people who are like entering their 30s and then just kind of see like a different perspective because I there was an episode that I talked about where like whenever I was turning 30 there was never really anyone talking about how life at 30 was. You
Mhm.
didn't really know what to expect, and then it, essentially there was this kind of like thought process where like once you're 30 you're old,
Yeah.
and like that's it, your youth is gone, and just like this like
Yeah.
negative stigma behind it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to change the verbiage a little bit, the narrative. And so I just do the same thing. I just do it for a hobby and
Yeah.
for the same reason. So
Yeah.
I
And
agree with you.
that's exactly what this like me making videos. Like, yes, I was trying to do it for a long time to be professional and do all that stuff, but I always knew that I loved doing it, right? Like it was always a way for me to like just know that I just never want I, I I wanted to stop working in an office, and everyone I knew always worked in offices,
Right.
and it just seemed like the worst, right? And I did it for 10 years. Like I worked in I was there. I was a corporate person, right?
Nine to
But
five.
9 to 5, like I'm
There you go.
messaging on Slack, using all of the project management tools, like I got you. And but yeah, like being in your 30s, like when you were saying that, I was thinking about like Friends, right? Like the entire thing of Friends is like a group of friends in their 20s getting to their 30s, and then once they got to their 30s the series ended, right? Or
Right.
like it's pretty much anything like that. Like Girls was the same way, like Living Single, like all of these things was like a group of people in their 20s having fun until they got to their 30s, and then the show ends, and it's just like, but and then for some reason you're like you have kids and you're in your 40s. It's like, well, what about your 30s? Like
Yeah.
what about all that
What
stuff?
about this whole
Like
decade? What
there's a lot.
happened? It's a huge
Right,
gap.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So once you get there, you're just sort of like, whoa, my 20s were crazy. That was nuts. Like, what did I even do? And then, you have to sort of live with that outcome. But yeah, I think changing the narrative around your 30s is super important. And just like creating that hobby of like creating, like you're creating, it was always a hobby. And like, once you find something that you can keep going with that hobby just to keep you sane, it's so important. So, so important.
So tell me, in the 3 years that you've been in your 30s,
Yeah.
what is the most important thing so far that you've learned?
Um, to So my wife and I met when I was 27, and I'm really bad with money, right? I'm very bad at budgeting, but I never wanted to like relinquish that control,
Hmm.
right? And I'm sure people won't agree with this, but like once I just relinquished control of just like my money and
Hmm.
just being like, no, you're better at this. I'll let you try it out. Like, and she's a magician, so I think the biggest thing is like maybe something that is uncomfortable actually will be better for you.
Okay.
Like it's very uncomfortable to post something that I didn't know until I was in my 30s, but like look how that's turned out. Like
Right.
just admitting you're wrong, admitting you don't know. Those are all very uncomfortable things, like sort of like doing all of those things that you didn't think, I don't know, some sort of like patriarchal thing. Like I should have my own bank account. I should be the one budgeting. I should be doing all of this stuff. But like man, it's so much better not doing that. So yeah, so that, I mean, I think that was a pretty important thing. Also just like being comfortable with yourself, I think is a big part of being in your 30s. I think there's like a big facade that we put up in our 20s of like what we should look like or should wear or whatever.
Hmm.
But like, man, comfortable clothes are so comfortable. They're
Yep.
so much better than tight pants. Holy crap.
I agree with you. Right now, you don't even know. I have shorts, like
Yep.
basketball shorts.
Like
Don't even care.
I'm wearing this wicked fabric that breathes well because I'm in LA and it's very hot.
Business at the top,
Top
party in the
party.
bottom. It's what it
Exactly.
is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what the most important thing is that I've learned in my 30s because it's just like there's so many things that I wish my 20-year-old self would have done differently, but without that, I wouldn't have seen the like perspective or that kind of thing. So
One thing that I understood from what you were saying was essentially being comfortable with being uncomfortable, but at the same
yeah,
time, being comfortable with yourself.
yes, exactly.
Like learning how to balance that out, that
Yeah,
comfortability in yourself, but at the same time, be uncomfortable in situations.
yeah. Like when I started growing out my hair, I was just like oh god, like okay, I know I want to grow out my hair. I don't have a job. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
grow out my hair. I'm just gonna go for it, right? And it was just such an uncomfortable thing. But then I kept on looking at myself, and I was like, no, this is what I want. Like I want to grow my hair out, and I think that was just sort of one of those things where like for a decade or more, I had that like clean cut, you know, the classic dude haircut, right?
Yeah.
And it was just so much like work and effort, and I was just it didn't ever feel like the greatest, and I always felt like I was living up to some sort of like standard of beauty or what handsomeness.
Yeah.
So once I finally like became uncomfortable because I knew I would be more comfortable later, I think that was a big shift.
I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I'm glad that people get to see your experience in
Yeah,
your 30s.
yeah,
And, like people coming into their 30s, they can feel comfortable with the changes that are going to happen in this decade. I have mentioned several times, 30s is a decade of a lot of change.
yeah,
It's you go from your 20s, like you said, everything is crazy. You're trying to be in, you're trying to do what's cool. You have FOMO. And then coming into your 30s, you really like sink into who you really are.
yeah.
So it's a decade of a lot of change. What would you personally say to people who are entering their 30s?
It's gonna be okay. I promise. Maybe like I think entering your 30s is so interesting because you sort of like the first time I ever got heartburn was the night after my wedding. Like,
Okay.
like it was a truly an incredible experience. Like I got married, I'm 31, heartburn,
Yeah.
and it was just like the craziest thing. So like, you know, that I think that shifts into like, oh, I can't drink as much.
Right.
I think that's a really hard one. So I think what I would say to those people is like, hey, you're gonna be okay. It's just a different type of drinking.
Yeah.
Or just sort of friendships will evolve and change, and it's just part of it. It's gonna be fun no matter what. Like it's a blast. It's truly a blast, like to have, because you keep on having experiences. It's not like you just stop having experiences. I think that's one of the things that people think happen when you turn 30. It's like, no, like you're still experiencing life. Like if anything, you can afford to go do things more. Like
Absolutely.
it's rad. It's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
So
You
yeah,
get to do many different things that you didn't do in your 20s.
yeah,
I can tell you personally, in my 30s, I've traveled the most I've ever traveled in my life. So,
exactly.
like you said, you are having those experiences. You're continuing to have fun. It's just a different type of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
you get to, like I drove from, yeah, like my wife and I drove from Los Angeles to Seattle. Like that was something that we did by ourselves. And like, yeah, you can do that in your 20s, but it's a little less comfortable. And like, yeah, you might have some crazy stories, but at the same time, like we still went camping, we still saw like these beautiful redwoods, we saw like all these things on 101 that, you know, other people that I'd never seen before. And that was only because I could afford it because I was in my 30s,
Yeah.
you know. So, or like we went to, I don't know, we went to, I went to the Caribbean for the first time ever, and I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy!" Or like, I went to Hawaii for the first time. I was like, "You do this? Like, do people do this like in their 20s? Like, how do you even do that?" So it was just like such a cool experience, you know.
Yeah, and I think you actually end up enjoying it a little bit more in your 30s.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know
because you're
that I
not,
have.
yeah, because you're not like beholden to like, oh, like we need to go out and we need to, you know, I don't know. Like when I went to Europe in my late 20s, and that was my first time where I was like, oh, do I want to go to the club or do I want to go see that museum in the morning? You
Yeah.
know, and like I wanted to go see the museum in the morning because
Right.
like that's why I'm in Europe, you know. And that was my late 20s. And like I would have just been gone all day if I had done the other thing. So, you know, just that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that you said. I appreciate your time. I congratulations on your baby.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I hope everything goes well. And I want to
Yeah.
thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, and you know, thanks for reaching out. Please let me know if you ever want me to come on again and just say hey. It's been great talking to you too. So I hope that this like shines some light on like being in your 30s. Things are going to be okay, and you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be crazy.
Letting every 20-year old coming into their 30s, everything's going to be perfectly fine. You're going to
Yeah, you're
love it.
good. It's going to
Absolutely
be
love
dope.
it. Thank you so much. This has been Life at 30.